Now, I know what some of you are thinking. For Christ's sakes, Jeff, the 2018 NFL Draft just finished. What is wrong with you? Well, there's nothing wrong with me. The NFL Draft is not just a happening. It is a way of life. It is a year-round thing. And it is never too early, nada, to look ahead to next year. And I proudly present to you my way too early 2019 NFL mock draft. Boom! Boom! You can check out all 32 picks in the description box below. Now, first and foremost, take note that I did not shift order. I'm not making any predictions. I went solely based off of the 2018 draft order, putting Houston into pick number 4 because they'll have their first-round pick next year, putting Kansas City into their slot from 2018 they would have had if they hadn't traded away the Mahomes deal in the 2017 draft, and adding Green Bay in New Orleans slot for that draft day trade that happened on Thursday. So, that's all I did. Very simply. I kept the order the exact same for the F-all of it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the class to come. We always start with the quarterbacks, as we should. I haven't watched a ton of these quarterbacks yet. My early impression is that I'm not that impressed with some of the bigger names. I could see some of these guys rising and climbing as we go into the 2018 season and into the draft cycle of 2019. I look at a guy like Drew Lock. It's going to be somewhat similar to Josh Allen in terms of the talk about measurables. I can anticipate somebody like Justin Herbert or from Oregon being somebody that would rise in the process. I put Will Grier in round 1 as much as a talking point as anything else because I feel like there's going to be a lot of talk about two segments when it comes to Will Grier. People that really, really, really like him and people that really, really think he's a system quarterback. I could have just as easily put somebody in there like a Ryan Finley from an NC State. But again, the truth is, don't read too much into this because the 2019 draft is almost 365 damn days away. So I didn't put that much thought and emphasis on it. And while I could say for the most part I have watched at least 1 or 2 games on every single one of these players, I in no way have started to grade or anything. This is just early impressions, early thoughts, and that is it. So that's the quarterback class. A lot can change. What I see early on is the real strength of this draft class is going to be the trenches, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And you see that reflected here as the top 4 picks are all offensive and defensive linemen. And I think in a lot of ways that could be close to the reality that we see next year. Regardless, even if a quarterback sneaks in there or this player sneaks in there, you're going to see a lot of linemen on both sides of the ball go early and often. This is going to be a really, really good draft there. The most notable names are going to be Greg Little, Nick Bosa, Ed Oliver, Dexter Lawrence. You're going to hear a lot about other guys as well, though. Rashan Gary is another guy I could think of. Hell, Christian Wilkins is somebody that's going to be forgotten about by some people just because of the depth of what Clemson has along that defensive line. Now, think about this for a second, just to kind of tangent here for a second. Clemson has 4 defensive linemen that could potentially go in round 1 next year. That is insane. Dexter Lawrence, Clelin Ferrell, Austin Bryant, Christian Wilkins. They all have a chance of going in round 1. Do they? Probably not. Maybe 2 or 3 of them for sure. But just even the fact we could envision potentially 4 of them going is just absolutely insane. Now, looking at the very top of this draft, Greg Little, talking about him being a franchise left tackle, that's going to probably play really well, potentially get him drafted really, really high. And if the Browns had the number 1 pick again, having just taken Baker Mayfield, unless they had already determined after 1 year that Mayfield sucked and they had to move on, protecting him with a left tackle that replaced Joe Thomas long-term would be a top priority. Hence why Greg Little ends up number 1 here. It's not necessarily a statement that he's the number 1 player. It's just saying if the Browns were in this position, a franchise left tackle would probably take precedent over everybody. The Giants taking Nick Bosa at number 2. You see what his brother's done since he's gotten into the NFL. Some people are going to think of Nick as an equivalent, if not slightly better prospect. He looks like one of the studs of this next draft class for sure. Ed Oliver from Houston, there's going to be a lot of hype train on him. And a lot of people may end up rating him as their number 1 defensive tackle. Some others might look at Dexter Lawrence as being that dude. Again, like I said, this is an outstanding class early on impression in terms of offensive and defensive line. Now, I threw a couple of small school guys, lower-level school guys, onto this mock for conversation standpoint and to bring awareness because, let's face it, when you looked at the end of 2017's draft and did the 2018 draft, a lot of things are different for everybody than what actually happened. So I threw in there Larry Allen III. If you're thinking, who's that? Is that his son? It is Larry Allen's son. He's a big beast in the middle. Could him going number 16 be crazy? Yes. But it might happen. He's got the bloodlines, that's for damn sure. Then I look at a guy like Deion Harris, the corner from North Dakota. I wouldn't be surprised if he got quite a bit more buzz as we went into the 2018 season. Again, these small school guys can pop up out of nowhere. Like if I had told you after 2017's draft that in 2018 a kid from UTSA named Marcus Davenport was going to go 14th overall and a team was going to give up a future first-round pick to get him, you'd have called me crazy, as you should have, and yet that's what happened. Just funny how these things work out. I think the tight end class is going to be a little bit better. You'll see I have 2 tight ends going in round 1, and there's other depth there too, just not guys that made it into the top 32. The wide receiver class, I'm pretty confident is going to be better in 2019 with A.J. Brown and Ahmmon Richards, Colin Johnson. It's not even throwing guys into the mix like the kid from Arizona State. That's not even throwing into the mix guys like Paris Campbell. It's not throwing in guys into the mix like Deebo Samuel. To me, it's a much better wide receiver class in 2019, especially at the top. The running back class could still be okay, but I anticipate it being a step down from 2017 and 2018. I think the class is going to be a little bit better in terms of 3-4 edge rushers, but again, that remains to be seen. Looks early on like secondary could be a little bit down, but every year I can kind of say that, and then as we go through the process, defensive backs rise a little bit. But when I look at this class, I feel like the theme is going to be the trenches in 2019 because the trenches on both sides of the ball are really, really damn good, which is going to be interesting because that can lead to players at other positions potentially being reached on because teams are going to be confident in the level of talent later on in terms of offensive and defensive linemen. That's going to be the dominant thing. Still, ultimately, how interesting the draft comes down to the quarterback position and what if any of these quarterbacks give any impression that they could be that dude. It could potentially be a slightly more boring draft next year just because there's more of these nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes guys that teams are going to be drafting. But right now, it looks like a good draft class with a few guys that look like they could be real studs in the season to come. But what do I know? It's just my way too early 2019 mock draft, and I'm sure looking back on it a year from now, a whole hell of a lot of the dynamic of this is going to look vastly different. But it's fun to talk about, or maybe you want to wring my neck because I'm already talking about next year's draft.